Reefs provide crucial sources of income and resources, including roles in tourism, fishing, building materials, coastal protection, and the discovery of new drugs, including antiviral drugs and anti-cancer agents. Coral reefs protect coastlines from storm damage, erosion, and flooding by reducing the actions of waves across tropical coastlines. One prediction is that losing 58% of the world's reefs would cause a $90 billion loss in tourism alone, not to mention indirect losses from loss of protection of the tropical coastline. One of the biggest questions scientists face today is whether the present social and economic capacity of coral reefs can be maintained. One way to look at the socioeconomic causes and consequences of coral reef degradation is to see if the problem is beginning to fix itself. Overfishing is one of the main causes of reef degradation, and now fisheries are getting ever-decreasing catches. Tourists and the tourism industry were causing physical harm to the reefs, and now tourism is suffering and there are fewer divers every year. However, if we are looking to preserve the lives and economies of locals around coral reefs, management should be local, regional, and global in order to save tourism and fisheries.
Much has been written about coral reefs and the use of marine protected areas, or MPAs, as a management tool, but emerging trends and recommendations have not been adequately synthesized for the context of developing nations. A marine protected area, or MPA, is essentially a space in the ocean where human activities are more strictly regulated than the surrounding waters, similar to parks that we have on land. These places are given special protections for natural or historic marine resources by local, state, territorial, native, regional, or national authorities. MPAs have been commonly offered as an important management intervention, especially for coral reef systems. They have emerged as one of the most favored coral reef management tools to address issues of overfishing, habitat degradation, and to foster alternative livelihoods. There are several different management strategies used to govern MPAs. The ones I will discuss include the traditional, community-based, co-management, centralized management, and private management strategies. MPAs have existed for millennia, grounded in taboo and social norms. This suggests that these governance systems are sustainable and effective in some contexts. Community-based MPA management strategies are frequently employed in contexts with weak, formal, higher-level institutions, decentralization of decision-making, or where community rights activism is strong. Weak formal government support may be due to a lack of financial or technical resources. In these contexts, they are common, but much of the tropics, bottom-up governance regimens may be the only feasible option. They tend to engage resource users more effectively than top-down strategies since they lead to a sense of trust, collaboration, and ownership among participants. The fundamental principle of co-management is that it involves resource users and formal policymakers in a process of joint decision-making. Co-management, as a compromise between bottom-up and centralized management, potentially represents the best of both models, engaging resource users and government officials in an equitable and transparent planning process that is formally recognized and sanctioned. The centralized management strategy was historically the most common governance regime in colonial and post-colonial societies. The most serious limitations of centralized government are associated with how stakeholder groups respond to policies that will affect them, but for which they do not feel responsible. Centralized planning may not be sensitive to localized impacts of MPAs that may result in considerable socioeconomic and demographic changes. The last strategy is private management. While not commonly practiced, MPAs can either be explicitly or de facto privately managed. As with centralized management, private management tends to generate considerable controversies. In an effort to preserve coral reefs, different countries have also devised policies and legal documents. One such document is the International Coral Reef Initiative. In 1994, the United States was instrumental in establishing and supporting the International Coral Reef Initiative and its 3 framework for action and call for action. In initiating ICRI, the governments of the United States, Australia, France, Jamaica, Japan, the Philippines, Sweden, and the United Kingdom recognize the importance of stopping and reversing the global degradation of coral reefs and related ecosystems and preserving marine biodiversity. Additionally, the United States Coral Reef Task Force constructed the National Action Plan to Conserve Coral Reefs in 1998. This document addresses a complex problem with complex solutions, mobilizing the public and private forces to save coral reefs. Two fundamental themes that frame the Coral Reef Task Force conservative actions include understanding coral reef systems and reducing the adverse impacts of human activities. In understanding coral reef ecosystems, the Coral Reef Task Force intends to conduct comprehensive mapping, assessment, and monitoring of coral reef habitats, supporting strategic research on regional threats to coral reef health and the underlying ecological processes upon which they depend. In reducing the adverse effects of human activities, the Coral Reef Task Force intends to create an expanded and strengthened network of federal, state, and territorial coral reef marine protected areas, reducing the adverse effects of extractive users, reducing habitat destruction, reducing pollution, restoring damaged reefs, and strengthening international activities.
Our group also met with a coral reef expert here at Rice, Dr. Adrian Correa. Dr. Correa's research focuses on the symbiotic associations between corals and their microbes, specifically Symbiodinium, or Zooxanthellae. One thing that we learned was that there are several different species of these dinoflagellate microalgae. Essentially, there are 9 clades, or subgenera, and within those, there is great debate as to the number of species in total. We can't be sure whether every genetic difference justifies a new species. 2 of the common clades are Symbiodinium C and D. The adaptive bleaching hypothesis states that the relative abundance of symbiont communities can change, as a way of dealing with the stressor. This shuffling response allows for the species that is better adapted to survive, serving as a means of natural selection. For example, clay D is more thermotolerant, so a greater amount of D can help prevent or recover from bleaching. This brings up the possibility that colonies with a history of bleaching have a better chance of recovering. If clade C has decreased and clade D has increased in the past, D will be more abundant and the coral therefore more resistant. Dr. Correa believes that the biggest threat to Symbiodinium is climate change, specifically increases in temperature and light. Overall, the interview was extremely useful and informative.
Thank you for watching our educational video on coral reef bleaching and degradation.
We hope that you have a better understanding of the causes, impacts, and ways moving forward to combat the issue.
For more information, please visit the following resources. Thank you.
I snapped. It focused on my face. Especially. Can I just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. Or start over. Yeah. For fish species, both
It may take longer to return. Whoops.
For example, overfishing of
near the upper range of their temperature
lead to high levels of algal growth. Is that algal or algal? I don't know these words.
I'd say algal.
Algal?
Algal.
Algal? Can we Merriam-Webster this? Stop that real quick.
I can't swallow.
And an anti-cancer agent called RSC. I'm just not gonna say what it's called. Well, look at it.
I know, I'm good.